So our next speaker is someone who has a very interesting history for us. She was a teacher at some point, decided that she loves coding too much and came back to coding, has been an independent consultant for many years, and she has kitten pictures. Now, what can be better than that? Ladies and gentlemen, can I have a good hand for Clare Sudbury?
Okay, thank you. So I'm about to show you a slide that has nothing on it. And I'm telling you this because when I've done this talk before, people have come up and said, Claire, no, but there's no slides showing. It's okay, that is deliberate. The next slide is nothing, because I'm going to tell you a story and I'd like you to listen. If you want to, you can close your eyes. Okay, so once upon a time, there was a woman. She was a software engineer, and she had a background in maths. So she had a degree in maths. She had done A-levels in the UK in maths, and this meant that she was used to being in a minority. On her maths studies, she was one of maybe about 5% of women. Most of them were men. And therefore, the idea that women can't do maths was reinforced by her experience. And it was hard for her to not internalize that kind of idea. She ended up as a software engineer, where again, she was in fact the only female in a team of male software engineers. So again, this idea that women can't really do this stuff was reinforced. Also, it was quite intimidating because these men that she was working with had all been doing it since they were teenagers, whereas she'd come relatively late to computing. And she, again, felt like she didn't really belong. And then the next job that she had, she kept asking whether she could work on the really interesting, difficult stuff, and she kept being told no. And again, didn't really feel like she belonged. Then she had an interview for a more senior position, and she was told that she didn't know enough to get the job. After 12 years in the industry, she faced redundancy, and it was a relief. She left the industry altogether. She didn't feel like she fitted in. She didn't feel like she knew enough, and she was quite glad not to work in IT anymore. Okay, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And now I want you all to stand up. Okay? Everybody stand up. It's after lunch. You're probably feeling a bit sleepy. Just wake up. Okay, so you can sit down if you know everything about everything. Nobody? No, okay. Right, well, you can sit down if you never have to Google anything related to your area of expertise. Oh, a couple of people sitting down. Most of you still on your feet. Okay, now, I was tempted for my next question to say, if you've ever laughed at anybody for not knowing things, I was going to ask you to sit down. But I'm not going to do that, because that would be shaming you, and that's unnecessary. So I'm not going to do that. But I am going to say, sit down if you think you should know more than you do. Sit down if you worry that people will find out you don't know much about the latest hot topic. Sit down if you've ever considered switching roles or careers because you can't keep up. Okay, well done for those who are still standing. You may now sit down. So, my name is Clare Sudbury. I have been a software engineer for 22 years now. I am an independent agile technical coach. Actually, I haven't been independent for years. I've only been independent for 8 weeks, so it's still very exciting. But I've been a consultant for a while. I help people to develop effective software. My particular expertise is in techniques such as test-driven development, refactoring, and collaborative stuff like pair programming and working in ensembles, or mobs as some people call them. I'm also available, so come and talk to me if you need a technical coach. Imagine a world where there is no imposter syndrome. Imagine a world where you can arrive at work every day excited about learning new things, and where you never worry that you don't know enough. Because being an effective IT professional is not about what you know, but we think it is. And that's what causes the problems. So the story that I told at the start, you may well have guessed, was about me. And I did indeed leave the industry altogether. I have been doing this for 22 years, but I left the industry after my first 12 years. And I didn't think I was coming back. I never felt entirely confident that I knew what I was doing. I never felt entirely confident that I really fitted in. So I thought, I'm done with it. I don't want to be a software engineer anymore. And I retrained as a high school maths teacher. Now, the reason that makes me laugh is because it was such a disaster. It turns out that even if you really love maths, persuading teenagers that maths is fun is really hard. And when teenagers don't think maths is fun, but are still forced to be in a maths classroom 4 times a week, they don't always behave well. And my ability to persuade teenagers to behave well is not as good as some of my other skills. So I didn't last long as a maths teacher. I came back into the industry. But let's talk about when I left. I left the industry because I felt inadequate. But why did I feel inadequate, and what did I feel inadequate about? Well, I was always feeling stupid. I don't actually think I am stupid, but it's incredibly easy to feel stupid. I never felt like I knew as much as everybody else, and that's why I left the industry. Now, when I came back into the industry, I was able to make a few changes, and I'll talk about those, and I'll talk about why I now enjoy my job, even though I still feel stupid. So even though there are loads of things that I don't know, I have found ways of making my peace with that. And now, as well as technical coaching, I also run training courses, boot camps, and workshops, which means I'm very aware of how often everybody else feels stupid. In previous roles, I've also noticed how my colleagues, my direct reports, and my mentees also often feel stupid. And I've noticed some behaviors that I think contribute to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some of those behaviors. I'm going to talk about their impacts, and I'm going to talk about some of the ways that we might be able to do things differently. So these are the things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the fact that we quite often judge one another. I'm going to talk about when we laugh at one another. I'm going to talk about what happens when we talk in jargon. I'm going to talk about often people's reluctance to train up junior engineers. I'm going to talk about gatekeeping into the industry. I'm going to talk about the idea of rock star developers. I'm going to talk about the idea that when we feel like everybody else knows more than us, I'm going to talk about what happens when we hide our own ignorance. I'm going to talk about the idea that seniors and leads should know more than everybody else. And I'm going to talk about the fact that the tech is the hardest part, or is it? So first of all, I'm going to talk about this idea of talking negatively about others. Now, something that I have often heard people say after they've conducted an interview, so they'll have interviewed an engineer for a position, they come back into the room afterwards and they say things like, "Can you believe I just interviewed this developer and they didn't even know what was?" They could be anything. But people expressing incredulity that they've interviewed somebody who doesn't know about something that they think everybody should know. And then the other thing that I've often heard people say is things like, "Wow, I've just discovered that one of my colleagues doesn't understand something, and I'm shocked about this." Now, that's the problem. That's what I think the problematic behavior is. So what is it? What is its impact? You could say the fact that the people they're talking about are not present in the room makes it all right. Because the people who are being judged don't necessarily know that they're being judged. But that doesn't prevent the impact that I'm going to talk about, is that everybody who does hear it will internalize it. And they'll think, I hope people aren't saying that about me. I'm now worried that people might say that about me. I'm now constantly going to be thinking about what I know, what ignorance I'm displaying, what knowledge I'm displaying, and whether people might be judging me. And people like me end up leaving the industry because they feel so inadequate all of the time. Another thing that the obvious impact of something like this is imposter syndrome, where people who are in roles that they have been promoted to, jobs that they have been given, that they've got on their own merits, but they're constantly worried that they've pulled the wool over people's eyes. The only reason they've got the job is because they've tricked people into thinking that they know more than they do, and they're worried that they're going to find out because they don't know as much as they think they're supposed to know, and people are going to be judging them for it. So, and I'd like you to just have a bit of a think about, have you ever worried about being found out for not knowing things that you think you're supposed to know? And chances are a lot of you will have done. And if most of us feel like that, then it's ridiculous. So what's the solution? Well, first of all, try not to say those things about people. Just because they can't hear you doesn't mean that other people aren't listening and internalizing. Okay, so the next one is laughing at people. Laughing or sneering at people who don't know things that you think they should know. So this is closely related to the other one. But this, the net gets widened here. So we're not just talking about colleagues. A really common one is for us to tell funny stories about our mothers who weren't able to grasp a particular element of IT. It's a really easy joke to make. We have lots of fun telling these stories about how stupid our mothers are. But the fact is that until you know it, you don't know it. And if you think that people are going to laugh at you, that is a disincentive to try and find out about something or learn how to do something. Because if you think that even by asking for help, you're going to cause derision and laughter, then you're not going to ask for help. So the impact is that people don't want to engage with anything to do with computers because they worry that they're going to get laughed at. What it means is that it's very hard to recruit sometimes. So the number of people who think that IT is an attractive career is significantly less than it might be because they think they won't know how to do it and they'll get laughed at. It's also hard, it can be hard to get good user data when you're trying to do user research because people don't want to engage because they're worried that they will display their ignorance. They don't want to be honest about how hard they sometimes find it to engage with various bits of software because they think they might be laughed at. So what's the solution? The solution is simply to have empathy. Now, for those of you who are younger than me, this might be hard, but I can still remember the first time I used a mouse. I'm 52 years old. I remember the first time I tried to use a mouse, and I remember how hard it was. I was already an adult. Now, a lot of people in the room were probably a child and probably don't even remember. But the first time I tried to use a mouse, it was like, what, I'm doing this, but and they don't seem to correspond, and I can't make it go where I want it to go, and why can't I just touch that thing? It was hard. So one of the things to do is when you see people behaving or interacting or displaying knowledge or behaviors that seem to you to be risible, think about, can you remember a time when you didn't understand something, where you might have behaved in a way which might have seemed funny to somebody else? Can you have empathy for the people in those situations? And can you think about what an incredibly soul-destroying experience it is for you to try something and then have people laugh at you for it? Okay, so the next one is talking in jargon. I'm going to show you another black slide. Don't worry, it's not a technical fault, because I'm going to tell you another little story. So, imagine the scenario. I've just walked into a meeting, but I'm late, sorry. I'm like, okay, sorry I'm late. And they say, it's fine. We were just talking about the ARM processor. And I say, right, right, yes, of course. But I'm thinking, oh no, hang on, ARM, what's that? I think I've heard of it before. I can't remember what it is. Meanwhile, they've said a bunch of other stuff that I haven't even heard because I'm still thinking, oh God, I can't remember what this thing is. And eventually I fess up. I say, look, I'm sorry. I've forgotten what ARM stands for. And then somebody says, articulated retention matriculation. At which point I'm thinking, oh God, okay, no, no idea. But now I don't want to ask again because I already feel exposed. And then somebody says, though really, we should be considering the AMRM at this point. And I'm like, oh no, what does AMRM stand for? Well, that's the articulated meta-retention matriculation. It's all in the document. Weren't you hired for your expertise in this area? And I'm thinking, meta, oh God, I just know that whenever things get meta, it all gets much more complicated. So what's happened here is I have struggled to follow anything. I felt bad about asking what's going on. I haven't understood the terminology that's being used, and I haven't met with sympathy when I've asked for clarification. The impact of using language that people might not understand is that colleagues will often struggle to understand you, but they won't tell you that. They will pretend that they do understand what you're talking about. And I've lost count of the number of times when I've witnessed a conversation and I've thought, I'm pretty sure that neither of those people understand what the other person is saying, but they're just pretending they do and just steaming forward regardless. And you get these weird vicious cycles where everybody is using obfuscatory language to protect themselves, to make themselves look good, and nobody is admitting that they don't understand what the other people are saying. And then it kind of snowballs. And the other thing that can happen is when you finally do understand what everybody's talking about. So for instance, you join a new company, new domain, you don't know it. At first you don't understand what anybody's talking about, but eventually you learn all the terms and all the acronyms and all the abbreviations, and you start using them too, because it's great, I know what I'm talking about now. And what you're doing is you're pulling the ladder up behind you, because what you're not noticing is the other person who arrived after you did is now struggling to understand what you say, but you're so busy feeling great about the fact that you can use the language too, that you're not necessarily paying attention to how it impacts other people. And there's a very simple solution to this. There are a couple, actually. The first one is, if you think there's any chance that people might not know what you're talking about, explain your terms. It doesn't take long. Some acronyms actually say longer to say than the things that they stand for. So if you think there's any question that people might, explain. But also, just make it clear that people can ask. Make it absolutely, make sure that everybody knows that if there's anything they don't understand, they can ask. Check whether people understand. And model that behavior by whenever there's anything that you don't understand, any terms that people are using, ask people to explain them. And ask confidently, like, why wouldn't you? And remember that, and make sure that everybody knows, remind people that when you're working as a team, you are less effective if you don't understand one another. So everybody benefits when one person asks for clarification, even if they're the only person that didn't understand, because if they don't understand, you're not going to be effective. But chances are they're not the only person. Okay, so that's talking in jargon. Another problem is being reluctant to train juniors. Now, this stems from this idea that we need everybody on the team to be up to speed. We need them to know what's going on, and we don't want to be slowed down by having to explain everything. We want everybody to know everything, and we don't want to have to tell anybody anything. And this is really common, that people will say, oh, I can't have a junior on my team at the moment because I don't have the time to train them. So what's the impact? Well, I mean, the really simple one is a skills shortage, that actually most companies struggle to recruit people who are experienced. And it's quite hard to get into the industry because you need experience, and you can't get experience because nobody wants to train juniors. So that's one impact. And another impact is that when you do get juniors, because they hear people saying these things, they feel really insecure. They're really worried that they're slowing you down. And if they're worried that they're slowing you down, they're not going to ask for help, which means that they will actually move even more slowly. And they will actually drag the team down because they're not telling you that they don't understand what's going on. So what's the solution? I mean, the solution is to take juniors on, but I would like to make the case for having juniors in your team. And in fact, I would say more generally that whenever there is anything that you are resisting because you think it will slow you down, it's nearly always a thing that you absolutely should be doing. So we tend to favor speed over effectiveness. We tend to be in this terrible rush all the time, and we're not helped by stakeholders and business owners who are always in a rush. But actually, asking for time in most contexts is a good thing. So, for instance, I have a whole other talk about refactoring. Ask for time to refactor because it actually speeds you up in the long run. But for juniors, when you have somebody on your team who doesn't know the ropes and who needs help, it means that everybody on the team has to start explaining what they're doing. And actually, you find that everybody benefits from that. One of the reasons that everybody benefits is because actually, probably everybody doesn't know what's going on anyway. So having it explained is good for everyone. But also, when you have to explain something, it deepens your own knowledge. Quite often, when you try to explain something to somebody, you suddenly discover your own gaps. And that means that you can then go on a journey with the person that you're teaching, and you can learn together. But also, having juniors on your team means that they will ask questions that you had either not thought of or forgotten about. And they will question things that you've just always done in a certain way that isn't necessarily the best way. And when they ask about it, that forces you to revisit, readdress, reevaluate, which is a good thing. So teams benefit from having juniors, and the whole industry benefits. Okay. And another solution to this is that you should pair more often. Having juniors encourages you to pair. Pairing is a really, really effective way of developing software. Again, because it creates communication. It means that more than one person understands what's going on. And it tends to speed you up, because actually what you're doing is you're paying attention. You've got two people paying attention to what's going on, and a pair will stop you from going down a rabbit hole. And if that pair is a junior who is in an environment where they've been encouraged to question things, then quite often they will be the one that spots something odd that you're doing and questions it and pulls you back. Okay, so again, in the spirit of learning, I want to talk about the lucky 10,000. So when you're taking juniors on, what you're doing is you're celebrating learning. You're encouraging a culture of learning. You're saying, on this team, we like to learn. We like to learn together. We like to bring people on the journey with us. We like to help people learn. And this is another argument in favor of a strong learning culture. There's a lot of words on this slide, so I'll talk you through it. You may well have seen it before. This is another XKCD. It's not the first time we've seen this comic. He says that he tries not to make fun of people for admitting that they don't know things. He then does some spurious maths. So he uses the example of the Diet Coke and Mentos thing. And for those that don't know, the Diet Coke and Mentos thing is when you take a Mento and you put it in a bottle of Diet Coke and a chemical reaction occurs. I'm not a chemist, I don't know what that is, but something happens and it goes whoosh. And it's pretty cool. It's quite exciting. But obviously, people aren't born with this knowledge. So everybody who knows about it must have learnt about it at some point. The spurious math is he says that he reckons everybody knows about it by the time they're 30, and based on the birth rate in America, he works out that there are 10,000 people a day who learn about the Diet Coke and Mentos thing. And then the point that he's making is, if you meet somebody who doesn't know about the Diet Coke and Mentos thing, there are two ways that you can react. One is with derision. Oh my God, have you been living under a rock? How can you not know about the the Diet Coke and Mentos thing. You're judging them, you're laughing at them, you're discouraging them from admitting when they don't know something. Or you can say, oh, fantastic, you're one of today's lucky 10,000. And not only are you one of today's lucky 10,000, I'm lucky too, because I get to show you the Diet Coke and Mentos thing. So I get to go on this journey with you. I get to experience your joy and wonder about learning a new thing, and you get to learn a new thing. So you can expand that idea to all learning, where you can say, I want to go on a journey with people. I want to help them to learn rather than laughing at them for not knowing things. So another problem is gatekeeping. And this is when we're recruiting, we have really tight lists of what we're looking for, what knowledge we expect our new recruits to have. And if they don't know exactly the things that we say they should know, then we won't let them through the door. The impact of this is that we can't find the right people, because these unicorns don't exist. These people that have, and there are various stories of job specs that say you have to have 5 years of experience in a technology that's only existed for 2 years. But it doesn't actually help when you really, really narrowly define the knowledge that you expect your new recruits to have. The solution is to, instead of thinking about what they should know, instead of thinking about knowledge, think about aptitude and attitude. Think about what's really required for competency, because often it isn't knowledge. What it is attitude, the ability to learn, an eagerness to learn, the ability to be able to think about who to ask or where to look to find out new things, and the ability to pick up new skills quickly, because actually that's what we need in this industry. And knowing stuff is not the point. Being able to learn stuff is the really useful skill. Because the range of knowledge in our industry is very wide. It's very wide. So for those people who were there last night, you'll remember when we were learning about the Fountain of Youth. You weren't all there, so you'll have to ask people who were. But even the people in City Hall didn't know how the fountains in Elst worked. So just because somebody hasn't encountered the thing that you think they need to know doesn't mean they wouldn't be an asset. So don't ask whether they have what you need. Whether they have what you need, ask what they do have. What do they know? Because they may have skills and knowledge that you'd never even thought of, but are going to be really useful. So another problem is the idea of the rockstar developer. We saw the lightning talk with the king of all things. But the idea of the rockstar developer is the idea that what you want to do is recruit a rockstar developer. And Joel Spolsky actually wrote a book on recruitment where he makes a big deal of talking about the rockstar developer and how what we should do to attract them into our companies. The problem with the idea of the rockstar developer is that most people aren't rockstar developers, and when you encourage that idea, there's almost this kind of two-tier system where there are the rock stars and then there's just everybody else. What you're doing is you're encouraging people to feel really bad about themselves when they're not rock stars, but you're also encouraging the rock stars to have massively inflated egos, and also to not admit when they don't know stuff, because even the rock stars sometimes don't know things. You're also encouraging the idea that there will be you're getting these single point of failures, which was pointed out in the lightning talk. So you're putting all the responsibility on one person's shoulder. So when they die or leave or get fed up, what do you do then? It's not helpful. What you really want is teams that can work effectively together rather than single individuals. And the solution is to aim for collaboration instead. Don't be looking for single individuals who are amazing. Look to create teams that can collaborate effectively to create something where the sum is greater than its parts. So another problem is when we as individuals think that everybody else knows more than we do. And I have this thing that I call the wheel of confusion. This comes from when I was working at ThoughtWorks, which is an organization that has an international reputation, and there are thousands of software developers, and there is an internal message board that has tons and tons of topics going past on a daily basis. That's me at the bottom with different hair. These are all of my colleagues, and these are a list of topics that I felt I really didn't know very much, if anything, about. And from my point of view, it looks like it's tempting for me to think that all of those people know all of those things. But actually, Andy is looking at all of the people and thinking, oh no, they know all of the things, and I only know about my thing. And Anik is thinking the same thing. And so is Ezra. These are real people, by the way. This was a work party where I ran around with my phone, badgered people and said, I want 2 photos of you. I want one of you looking confident and one of you looking confused. So that's Georgia panicking. Here's Ileana, worried. Here's John, really uncertain. This is Kirsty, who's terribly upset. Here's Mircea. Here's Rob. Here's Scott. They've all got the same problem, that they're looking at all of these other people and thinking, all of the people know all of the things, and it's only me that doesn't. So the problem with the wheel of confusion, the impact of it, is obviously that people will really struggle to feel confident in their own skills. The problem is that what they're doing is they're comparing themselves to others, but with a very unrealistic idea of what other people know. It's surprisingly easy to draw the conclusion that all of the people know all of the things and it's only you that doesn't, when in fact, everybody has areas of expertise and areas of confidence, but most people don't know most things. And you are not alone. So the solution is to remember those faces on the wheel of confusion. And remember, you're not the only one. So another problem, that because we're worried that people will laugh at us, because we're worried about being found out, because we're worried about what we think the list of competencies for our own role is, that means that we're not honest about what we don't know. So this is the last story, again, deliberately blank. This is a story about me going to the hairdresser. So I was at the hairdresser, and this was when I had more hair, which is more complicated, which is why I no longer have so much hair. And the hairdresser asked me whether I had straighteners, because in order for me to maintain this beautiful creation, I was going to need straighteners. Straighteners are a thing. I mean, I don't have straighteners, but they're some kind of thing that allows you to make your hair straighter. But I said, yes, I do have straighteners, because it felt like that was the right answer. And the question was asked, it wasn't, oh, do you have straighteners? It was, you do have straighteners, don't you? And I said, yes, I have straighteners. I didn't have straighteners. And this is something that happens a lot, that people will pretend to know about things. And when they do that, it massively contributes to that feeling that they're an imposter. When you're telling people or allowing people to believe that you know about things that actually you don't really know about, then what happens is it limits you. It means that you can't learn. Now that you've pretended you know it, how are you going to ask people about it? How are you going to find out about it during work time? You're now going to have to do a bunch of extra work, or you're going to have to hide the fact that you're doing work. You're going to have to lie about what you're doing. This is not a good feeling. This is not a way to build effective teams. So the solution, and it's a really simple one, but a really, really powerful one, and if you remember nothing else, remember this. Asking questions is incredibly important. And it's kind of obvious. I mean, you maybe think, well, yeah, of course. But does that mean you do it? And what often happens is that we don't ask questions because we're afraid of looking stupid. And if we work in environments where people habitually don't ask questions, then we also won't ask questions. So the solution is to do it. And I would particularly say that if you are in a senior position or a leadership position, it's even more important that you ask questions, because there will be things that you don't know about and things that you don't understand. And some of those things will be really simple. And what I do is I constantly ask questions. And I will, particularly if it's a simple question, particularly if it's a thing that I think I'm supposed to know. But there are two ways of asking questions. One is, no, I'm really sorry, I probably should know, but tell me about that thing. That's not a good way of asking questions. A good way of asking questions is to say, right, okay, so you said this, which I understood, and then there was this, which I also understand, but this bit, don't understand it, and explain why you don't understand it. And do it in a way as though you would just assume that it's okay. Of course it's okay. Why would I not ask a question if I need to know the answer? Why would I be embarrassed about being a human being who sometimes doesn't know stuff? And why would I be embarrassed about being a human being who sometimes forgets stuff? So quite often I'll say, you know what, I know that I've heard about that before, and I think maybe I once knew about it, but I've forgotten. Remind me, what is this thing? And when you do that, what you're doing is you're giving permission to everybody else to do the same thing. And you do want them to, because if they don't know a thing, then they need to know the thing, and the way they're going to find out is by asking. Okay, so another problem is when we think we should know more than everybody else. This happens particularly with people in senior and lead positions. They won't admit when they don't, but actually, and the impact, again, is that you're encouraging people to hide their ignorance. You're also encouraging people to be arrogant, to be honest. Why would you know more than everybody else? Just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't mean you know more than everybody else. And particularly if you've moved from a senior position to a leadership position, you'll be as an engineer, you'll be less hands-on, and you will start knowing less. And you want your senior engineers to know more than you. That's how it should be. So the impact is that people feel threatened, and the solution is actually to deliberately surround yourself by people who know more than you. Okay. Don't assume the tech is the hard part. It's not. People are. My story has a happy ending. I'm in a rush now because I've run out of time. My story has a happy ending, which is that by embracing ignorance, by embracing learning, by confidently asking questions, what I discovered is that people respected me instead of judging me, and I now enjoy my job much better, and I can be honest about when I don't know things. And finally, I want to present to you the Stupidity Manifesto. Now, I haven't got round to actually sharing this in a way that means that people can sign up to it, but it's on my to-do list. But for now, I'm just showing it to you. So my manifesto says, let's have an explicit policy of curiosity towards all things. Let's encourage one another to shout out if we don't encourage curiosity. Let's all agree that we're going to encourage curiosity. And let's ask what people need to know rather than what they do know. Let's not judge people when their knowledge doesn't match ours. Let's give our colleagues every opportunity to learn and explore without risk of judgment or derision. Let's give new people a chance to show us what they can do rather than saying you need to do this. Let's encourage everyone to ask questions and acknowledge the broad range of knowledge in our industry, because our industry never stays the same. The number of new technologies, frameworks, and tools is growing exponentially. Nobody knows all the things, and nobody ever will. Also, remember that we all forget stuff. Lead by example and be honest when we're confused. Focus on aptitude rather than knowledge. Remember what it feels like when you're learning and be empathetic to those who are. Prioritize clarity over jargon. And remember, this is not idealism, this is pragmatism. This is how we progress. Let's stop making each other feel stupid. So have a think about what you might be able to do to make things even better. This is my son doing a happy little thing to make you all feel good. There's a podcast called Making Tech Better that I hosted for a year. Here are some relevant episodes that might be relevant to what I've been talking about today. I interviewed 29 different people on a bunch of really interesting topics. This is my other son, also showing off and being happy and joyful to make you all feel joyful. And this is how you can contact me.